Chapter 15. Of course, the human laments. "I'm so sorry for the delay," Julian said. "The lunch rush usually doesn't start this early, and I just met up with an..." He looked toward Katerina while searching for the right terminology. "A dear friend." "It's all right. I appreciate your situation," Nadia said, "and I appreciate your business. What can I get for you?" Julian didn't miss a beat. Glancing quickly over the menu on the side of the truck's exterior, she found the words mentioned in the online article, which had intrigued her. "Let me have a Corexican wrap with a mild queso dip." "Sure enough, coming up," Julian said, and ventured to prepare the food. Nadia looked in her purse and found the cash for the food. He hoped she noticed that there was no tip jar and assumed that he was the owner, as was the tendency of the food trucks in town. Tips were customary for those who worked for the owner, but the owner required no such monetary incentive above the transaction to be motivated to the task. Julian noticed over his shoulder that Nadia experienced an awkward wait at the window. He could only imagine her justification as he heard her footsteps on the gravel move toward the back of the truck and heard her introduce herself to Kat, apologizing for interrupting their conversation. He hurried, yet maintained his deliberate focus on preparing the meal for his customer, and smiled as the dish wound to a delectable perfection. Hearing only the muted voices and unable to distinguish the words, Julian leaned out the window and craned his head to see them chatting. "Ma'am," he got her attention. She paused in her conversation and walked back. "Sorry for the interruption," he said with a smile. "Revenge is yours," Nadia joked, hoping he would find it funny as she paid him. He giggled and counted out her change. "Yeah, she's a good talker." He handed her the change and a few napkins with her paper plate on which his masterful creation sat beside a small covered plastic cup of his queso sauce. "Thank you," she said, and was immediately met with his retort, "Thank you." Nadia repeated herself to break away from the stimulus reactions he would have from being well versed in the hospitality skills required of him by his business. "Thank you, and if you don't mind, I would like to sit with y'all while I eat this at the little table back there." Julian looked out to Kat and thought about the request. He didn't judge this woman for asking. He knew all people were just seeking to have the human experience verified by interaction with other people. But he weighed how this observer might play in the course of the conversation he and Kat would have. He had been awestruck in seeing Kat, and all the fervent sensual truth of their previous time together came rushing back to him. They only barely had time to discuss what each had been up to, her congratulating him on his business and him commending her on her achievement of becoming a doctor of education. The conversation had begun to venture into the realm of the sticky topic of their parting, and he was nervous for how both he and her would react to knowing the reasons each had for their abrupt ceasing of communication. This woman who interrupted the flow of that conversation was now offering, unbeknownst to her, to be the buffer that might allow the conversation to resume, with tones of civility and mutual respect dominating. Or maybe she was Kat's friend, and the two would gang up on him and kill him behind his food truck. If so, so be it. He had had a good life, and would let that be the way he would go, if that was the way he was meant to go. "If you don't mind being an observer to a fairly novel reunion of long-parted dear friends, then please join us." He walked through the truck and exited out of the back. She was following along the outside and giving care to make sure her food would not topple over. "That is, of course, if you don't mind," he addressed his words to Kat. "You will barely know I am here," Nadia said, walking up. "I don't want to impose on your reunion." Kat was visibly taken aback by the use of the word describing her conversation with Julian. But I really do not want to eat alone, and I will vanish as soon as I am done. It is fine with me. You said that this was your first impromptu venture outside the home in motherhood in a few months. I imagine some adult conversation might suit your intellectual desires well. Kat looked toward Julian and watched him instinctively lean back when she deployed the term adult conversation. Incredibly good talker, Nadia said, making way to the small table and chairs. Are you a lawyer or something? Actually, a doctor, Julian answered for her. Of education, Katerina added as they sat. Well, Doc, Chef, she lifted her wrap in toast to their names. I'm Nadia, and she took a bite. Julian exhaled and smiled slightly. Nadia. They both looked at him as he turned his head to Kat. The torrent of emotion he was experiencing so far reached even higher, and he rode the swell as though he were surfing, seeking the wave to bring him ashore. That was my mother's name. That is quite the coincidence, Kat said in very measured tones, so as to convey nothing other than the coincidental nature to which she called their attention. Coincidence is the pace that holds the world together, Nadia said. Imagine how much of everyone's lives hinges on coincidence. She smacked her lips and pointed to the wrap. This is so incredibly good. She looked at Kat. Do you know how good this is?